voy a ceder la palabra a mi jefe, Keiji Noue, oficial a cargo de la División de Comercio Internacional, para que modere la próxima sesión. Keiji, por favor, tienes la palabra.
Gracias, José. Ahora tenemos un bloque sobre el análisis de las políticas públicas y experiencias nacionales, ¿no? Después de ver ya las metodologías, la aplicación práctica, algunos datos y algunas simulaciones preliminares. Y el primer subbloque de este bloque tiene que ver con las políticas públicas relacionadas con la electromovilidad en América Latina en su conjunto y Asia Pacífico. Y sin más, le cedo la palabra primero al señor Madan, Bandhu Regmi, de la Comisión Económica y Social para el Asia Pacífico. Madan.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, KZ, for inviting me. And again, thank you, ECLAC and the organizer for giving me the opportunity to share some of the Asian experience. I have really heard many presentations, but I think what you are trying to do is more on the production side of the electric mobility, and then trying to tackle the transport sector and those type of things. But my presentation will be totally different. It is from the transport perspective, how we are trying to do in Asia, because still, I think you also mentioned that China is leading those things. And then I'll try to give some of the example of the countries and cities, how they are trying to transition to the electric mobility. Next slide, please. Can you put on the presentation mode and the next slide? Yeah, I think that we heard from the earlier presenter about the emission, growing emission in the Latin America. I'm just trying to give you the Asia is no different. I think even though we are trying to have many policies to reduce the transport emissions, but still, I think the last decade, we had a 41% growth on the transport emission. And then you can see the graph in some countries having a really high growth. And then actually this transport activity actually is going to be double by 2050 if you compare to the baseline scenario of the 2015. This is the International Transport Forum prediction. And we all know that 25% global emissions are from the transport, and the road transport, actually the freight as well as the passenger transport carries the highest share of the emissions, 75%. And you can see the share of the 41% passenger and 59%. This is really the global figure of 59%. Next one, please. Next slide, please. I think that we heard about the COP and then linked to the Paris Agreement. Actually, I think we don't need to reiterate the importance of it. Many countries have signed to it, and then by a way of putting the NDC, they have committed to reduce the carbon emission. And there is also the SDG 7. I think what it said that we need to double the energy efficiency by 2030. And then I think some of the outcome of the last year Glasgow meeting, actually I had an opportunity to organize a side event actually jointly with ECLAC in the Glasgow also in decarbonization and the big push towards sustainability. And some of the decisions, let's see there, I think one of the things was that they agreed on that we need to have a deep and the sustained reduction in the global GHG emission. And then actually there was a much discussion about the renewable energy use. I think you also know about this. Now I think that the watered down version is the phase down the unbattered coal power. We need to shift more renewable energy and phase out inefficient fossil fuel. I'm not sure about how it is in the Latin America, but the many Asian countries, I think there are the fuel is heavily subsidized. And then actually most importantly, what we are talking about today is the electric mobility. And then Glasgow also, I think they said that we need to really speed up the switch to the electric vehicle. And then when we talk about the switching to electric vehicle, I think one need to look at what is the structure of the transport in that particular country. And then if I talk of the many Asian countries, it's not only the private vehicle and the bus, but we have really the high number of the motorcycle, two-wheeler and three-wheeler and paratransit. The one in the picture you show is that a jeepney in the Philippines, which carries almost more than 50% of the passenger. And then there is already the transition toward the electric mobility. This is one of the solar jeepney in the Philippines. Next slide, please. And we at the Asia Pacific country, we look at what the country has said, I think, in terms of the policies in the national determined contribution, how they want to reduce the carbon emission. And when you analyze the policy of the Asian country, what we find is that you see at the bottom, they say that they want to improve the public transport. What we are talking about, electric mobility, actually there is many countries are trying to say that the electric mobility is the policy to reduce the emission. And then different type of renewable energy, biofuels and fuel, the LPG and CNG, as well as the improvement of infrastructure. And when we compare this policy on the passenger and freight, still there is so much focus on the passenger transport. Passenger transport is still not many in the freight transport. I think that we talk about the long haul railways, modal shift to the environmentally friendly transport mode. And then another focus is also the urban transport, because Asia is really urbanizing. More than 50% of Asian people are living in cities. So you need to provide sustainable and the low carbon urban transport. That's what actually the countries are also focusing on those policies as reflected in the NDCs of the Asian countries. Next slide, please. I think there is some time in the slide transition. Can I have the next slide? Next slide, please. And I think that you are talking about more about the production modeling and then those type of things. No, can you go one slide back? Sorry, can you go one slide back? Earlier slide, yes. You talk about more about the production modeling and then the import, export, input, output model. But what I think that we did last year was that we look at what would be the best scenario for the decarbonization of the transport in the Asia Pacific region. We model it, and then what I think that modeling shows that the electric mobility and combination of the improvement and the energy efficiency of the vehicle, that gives the highest scenario to reduce the emissions. So, and these both options are really the technology led, and the technology about improving energy efficiency as well as the electric mobility is still actually evolving. So another important aspect is that how we diffuse this technology from the, I think, the have to the have-nots. Actually, that is also really the important issue. Can you go to the next slide? Next slide, please. Yeah, and then I think that there is this modeling is one of the chapter in our the review of transport we published last year. And then Asia Pacific, actually we have a ongoing project about promotion of the electric mobility in public transport. So I think there are the two issues. So one is about whether you focus on the private vehicles or on the public transport. So rather than focusing on the private vehicle, it will be the decision, but we are trying to focus on the public transport as we are discussing today. And then we are trying to advocate country to have those policies and roadmap. And actually the last week, I just had one workshop for the Georgia, Laos, Nepal, Fiji, and Thailand. These are some of the countries which have really the high share of the renewable energy. Nepal, if you say this is almost 100% hydropower. Laos also is almost 100% hydropower. So you have really the huge potential to use that renewable energy in terms of the moving your vehicle. So that one. And then we want to have later this year at the Asia Pacific Initiative in electric mobility. And then you cannot do anything alone. So I think you need to have a partnership with the private sector as well as the public sector and the research organization. So actually we are having the GIZ, one of your partner, UNEP, Green Growth Institute, ASEAN, and the university and research institute on the highways. So this actually we are trying to promote the policies and the roadmap to transition to the electric mobility in public transport in some of the country, and then we will have a regional sharing of experience and the knowledge. Next one, please. The next, I think can we have the next slide? I think there is some delay in transitioning the slide. Yeah. And then I think you all heard about the China and everywhere. I think they are leading. So in terms of the electric vehicle also, I think China, this is a figure from 2019. So the China currently have about 58% of all the electric vehicle, including buses. And after that, I think the second one is United States, and then the European Union, and the Republic of Korea and Japan, they just have 1 and 2% of the total electric vehicle fleet. And then because we are talking about the public transport, actually the China, actually some of the cities, just like Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and Xi'an, this city actually operate 100% the public transport run by electricity or the electric mobility in this city. And the many cities are also emerging, just like the Shanghai and other also, even Beijing also you have the electric mobility. But these three cities are really having the huge share of the public transport on electric mobility. Next one. Now I want to share some of the how actually they did this electric mobility from these cases from the China, Nepal, Thailand, and Thailand. So basically the China, the growth in the China electric vehicle, actually it is not just a short span. Actually, if you look at how they started, I think they started back in 1991, I think, from the research and development, and then industrialization preparation, and then demonstration and promotion, and then industrial development. And now actually it's really why they are in leader is that there is a continuous actually the partnership among the government, research institute, private sector, as well as the entrepreneur and the electric bus operator. So it's not just the one, but there is really the big policy push and the financial incentive from the government, and then that is taken by the municipality and city government. Can we have the next slide, please? Next slide. Yeah. See, I think how they do the EV planning, I think that they call the new energy vehicle. Can we go one back? One slide back. Yeah. So you see that you have a
sorry, you have two more minutes. 2 more minutes.
Yeah, fine. I think I'm closing. So you have a standard and regulation and fiscal and the tax incentives and the promotion and the market access actually taken by the private sector. Can you have the next slide? And then similarly, India also, they have the faster adoption of the FAME 1 and FAME 2, and they have a budget allocated for that, and then they are implementing those in many cities, and there is a support from the central government. They have this initiative, faster adoption of manufacture of hybrid and electric vehicle, FAME 1 and FAME 2, and they have actually budget allocation, financial incentive, as well as the cities actually is more focusing on the public transport in cities, and many cities actually getting support from the central government in implementing those. Can we have the next slide? Next slide, please. And see, you can see that there are currently 150,000 buses are running on the Indian cities, and you can see each and every city they are trying to have the procurement of the electric buses. I think the maximum is 1,000 bus in one city, and then 1,500 in the some of the Indian city. Next slide. Can we have the next slide? Yeah, and experience in the Thailand is actually they have a really the very good policy and technical standard, but the important thing is that their vision is really high Thailand will want to become the global production and supplier hub in the electric vehicles and for automotive parts. And then they have actually 100% zero emission vehicle plan for that. And then most important thing is that they have one multi-sectoral national electric vehicle policy committee, where actually the deputy prime minister is chair, and then they discuss how to facilitate the operation as well as the industry growth on this one. So we are, and then they are already operating, one private sector is operating public bus in Bangkok. Next one, please. Can you have a next slide? And the Nepal, as I said, Nepal is 100% the hydroelectricity, and they have a high potential to have the electric mobility, and they have actually since 1991, and they have one electric transit running. But now I think their plan is to have 500 charging infrastructure, and the private sector is already operating public buses there, and they are trying to procure the electric buses in Kathmandu, basically from China. And then after that, their success in the capital, they want to have an intercity transport running on the electric mobility. And then we are actually discussing about the policy and how the roadmap should be on the Nepal as well. Can you have the next slide? Next slide, please. I think that should be the last slide. Yeah, basically what actually in terms of the promotion of the electric mobility you need is that basically comprehensive policy and the roadmap, you need that one. And then government should have the incentive scheme as well as a subsidy to have because there is really a big upfront investment for the electric mobility, and coordination between among the various ministry, energy, finance, transport, as well as the environment ministry and private sector stakeholder. And then basically the advocacy and capacity building is really important. And then most important is the partnership and collaboration among the research, public operator, as well as the private manufacturer. Thank you very much for listening. And then I hope I would have, it has been useful because of the shortage of time. Maybe I need to cut short those things. Thank you very much. And then next slide, you will see some linkage to some of the publication and blog we have written on the electric mobility. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Madan. And first, thank you for agreeing to joining at this late time in Bangkok. So we appreciate it, and I think we have a very good a preliminary idea of how the governments in Asia have been pursuing the electromobility policies, especially in the number of NDCs that you put in the first slide. But I think your last point is also very important about the collaboration between the private sector and the government, which is precisely why we're having this conversation today.